Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and today, yes, we're going to do the Boston Strangler. Um, Obviously, one of the most famous serial killers, or was it more than one serial killer in the United States, uh, people have forever been arguing about, and there's always going to be another twist to everything. So this new movie just came out from Hulu, um, which stars Keira Knightley, and they add in a whole bunch of different things. So I'm going to go through all of this. I want to explain something as I start, because I know I have one of these, these comments that I never take too seriously, but I do accept criticism. And one person said, "Well, you sometimes you jump back and forth to different things. Why don't you just stay straight and just do what you got to do, explain what you got to explain, and be done with it?" That's a legitimate complaint, but I want to take you through how I work as a profiler. That's what all of my shows are about. It's not just about my opinion. It's about you understanding how I come to certain opinions. And you don't have to come to the same opinion, but I like to take you through the process. And as a profiler, I can tell you, it is not a straight process because you're getting information in, and then sometimes you get different information. Then you realize the first information was wrong. And sometimes you just lay in bed at night going, it could have been this, it could have been that. How did this work? And you start running things through your head. And then crime scene reenactments, which I'm going to do, some strangling reenactments here today. I want you to understand how the whole process works, because if you're going to be a criminal profiler or a detective, or you just want to analyze things in life, you're going to go through this process. I know that sometimes certain profilers write books and it's like very, well, I just looked at this and went A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Okay. I doubt it, but okay. But I want to take you through the process. So yes. And since I don't have a scripted show anyway, and it's always live, I'm going to be jumping around a wee bit. So tough luck. So anyway, I want to welcome everybody here who's in the chat room. I think I actually already said hello to everybody. So, hey, Midgie's here too now. I heard the intro and Pat is loud and clear. Thank God. Okay. I fixed, I had mic problems last week and everything had to be redone. So I did that. So who haven't I said hello to? I haven't said hello to Florence, but I think I said hello to everyone else. So I'm not going to go back through that because I have so much to talk about. But if you would like to be in the chat room, which is a patron-only chat room, please join Patreon, link below, and then you can join at least 8 lives a month. But please also just like and subscribe, hit the bell. And I always try to let you know, I get so many requests. Could you do this show? And I've already done that show. So if you just want to know if I've done something, just go to YouTube, put in Profiler Pat Brown and whatever you're interested in. And you'll see if I've done the show or not. You just hit the search button and I pop up and then hey, she's already done that. So, and hit the bell for notifications for new stuff. My books are below. And a little dollar sign if you want to support the channel. Okay, now let's get to this. All right. First, the first thing I did, I always like to explain what my sources are for things, because that's important for anybody trying to understand anything. Where did you get your information from? And a lot of the information, quite frankly, is squirrely. It's like you're never even sure if it's accurate because you don't know where they got their information from. And you don't know how they interpreted their information. So unless I've worked the case myself and I have access to the police files, I'm going to say I'm a little limited by what I can access. In this case, for example, I wanted crime scene photos like you wouldn't believe. I came up with a couple here and there, but very, very limited. And everything else was opinions and supposedly, even when you go back to the police investigations, sometimes it's their opinions. So it gets tough to determine everything accurately. But I'm going to do the best. But most of all, again, this is an educational channel. I'm not coming to an absolute conclusion because I didn't work the case, but I want you to understand the process. So what materials did I access? Well, first thing I watched. First, I watched this one, which is the new Hulu Boston Strangler, movie. And I had to get the free month of Hulu, which I don't like Hulu, so I hopefully will remember to kill it before I have to pay money. But this Boston Strangler movie was let me show you who's in the movie. We have Keira Knightley. She is representing Loretta McLaughlin. I guess it's McLaughlin. Oh gosh, I don't know. Anyway, I've forgotten. And she is the protagonist of this particular film. She is a journalist who believed the murders were connected, and so she pursued that during her time with the newspaper she worked with. And also we have Carrie Coon, who represents Jean Cole, who was really, I think, pretty marvelous as far as her ability to investigate. She was quite something. She ended up working for the same paper, so at that time, Cole and McLaughlin got together and worked on the case together, writing a couple dozen articles on the Boston Strangler. Just to be fair, I'm not a fan of Keira Knightley. Just not. Huge fan now of Carrie Coon. I thought she was fabulous, and in my opinion, she was the only fabulous thing in this entire film. The lighting was so low, I was going blind, and it was so boring that I think I turned it off, like, I swear to God, a couple dozen times. I just stopped it, and I had to go do something else and come back and go, try to force myself to watch it again. And thank you, Benny. I think it's your fault. You told me to watch this thing, and the problem I have with everything else is that it's really about this one journalist and her experience and her victimization by men in society. In other words, she came up with this. She wanted to pursue this case, and her boss was like, yeah, whatever, just do like society crap. And she got mad, and then eventually somehow she managed to convince him, and then she was put together with the other journalist, and then they rocked the world and put together that it was one strangler at the time, a Boston Strangler, and therefore, isn't this amazing? But she also suffered at home because her husband got frustrated with her, and it's basically about her and not about the Boston Strangler. And I found a lot of the stuff not accurate, a whole bunch of stuff not accurate. So that really bothers me when you, at this point in time, when you change history to the effect that they did. I'm not fond of it. Now, there's also this old movie, this 1968 Boston Strangler movie with Tony Curtis, Henry Fonda, George Kennedy. It's a whole lot better to watch and quite amusing at points. Really enjoyed it. I thought they had the psychology that they eventually put on Albert DeSalvo, not quite accurate. And they leaned heavy on a psychic that was brought in, and that all looked nonsensical to me, but at least it was enjoyable, and a lot of their information about how the police were handling the case, I thought was more accurate than here, where basically she's like, oh, the police aren't doing anything. They're just completely ignoring everything. They weren't. They were working their butts off to try to figure out who this guy was. So let me show you a couple of things. And I'm going to tell you this basic story in a minute, but my other sources were, Gerald Frank's book, The Boston Strangler, which the 1968 movie was clearly based on. Then we have The Boston Stranglers by Susan Kelly, which clearly the new Hulu film was based on. And then I read The Cases That Haunt Us, that's John Douglas's book. He has a chapter on Boston Strangler. Then this one, The Case of the Boston Strangler. This is the History Channel, I think. Anyway, I'm not sure who Viewmore is, and I hope they didn't steal the stuff. But this was the best rendition, this crime documentary of the entire case. I would recommend going there. It has Albert DeSalvo in it. It has the everything from that time, which I think is brilliant. It's very, very good. It's very good. And then I had fun with this. I did look at Dr. Grande's view on Albert DeSalvo, and it's just a 60-minute thing. but I'll say I enjoyed it. And if you think I rattle on too long, you can go over to Dr. Grande because it's quite funny actually. And I'm not in disagreement with him on a lot of things there. So I think he's got some great points to make. And so you can go over there and check that out as well. I thought it was kind of fun, and I didn't say entirely disagree with him. So now let me tell you about the Boston Strangler. Just the very, very basics. The Boston Strangler is the name given to the murderer, if it's one murderer, of 13 women in Greater Boston during the early 1960s. The crimes were attributed to Albert DeSalvo. Based on his confession, details revealed in court during a separate case and also outside of court, and DNA evidence linking him to the final victim, which came up. I'll go into the whole DNA issue in a little later. In the years following DeSalvo's conviction, but prior to the emergence of this DNA evidence, various parties investigating the crime suggested the murders, sometimes referred to as the silk stocking murders, were committed by more than one person. All right, let me stop there. Four theories. One guy committed all the crimes. And that person is supposed to be Albert DeSalvo, especially since DNA supposedly connected him with the last crime, Albert DeSalvo. The next theory is there were two killers. The original guy who killed the six, I think it was 6 elderly women, and then DeSalvo, who killed the younger ones. And maybe there's an older one thrown in that he didn't do. Benny, that was the one you went with, that there were 2 killers. Then there is the theory that there were a whole bunch of killers. Like I don't know how many killers. And then there's a theory there is just one killer, but it's not Albert DeSalvo. So these are the things, all the theories that people came up with during that particular point in time. Now, I want to point out something about this movie, which drove me crazy. The names that were given to the Boston Strangler. Initially, the crimes were assumed to be the work of one unknown person dubbed the Mad Strangler of Boston. Now, mind you, the elderly women were being killed. Boom, boom, boom. So the police were on this as maybe this is one killer. So they keep saying the police had no recognition of that. That's not true. They actually went out to the public and said, ladies, don't open the door. Don't do this. Be careful because we don't know who's out there. So it wasn't that they weren't aware or thinking they might not be connected because they did go public with it. Now, sometimes police will not go public with serial homicides or links between serial homicides for a number of reasons. And let me explain them to you. One is that the homicides aren't that exotic, shall we say. You find like a woman's been attacked on a bike path. She's found strangled and raped. And then 3 years later, another woman gets murdered behind, I don't know, she's walking home from work. And she's found in the bushes. And she's strangled and raped. Are they the same guy? Well, maybe not, because there's only so many ways to rape and kill a person. So a lot of basic serial homicides are exactly that. They're basic. So there's nothing fancy. And so they look the same, but are they the same guy? Who the heck knows? So the police do not want to go out to the public and say, we got a serial killer, when they don't know, and they don't want to excite the public, and they don't want to excite the media, because then everybody goes down their throat and it's hell to solve. So unless there's obvious reasons why they have to be connected, they veer away from that. And that's pretty common. And sometimes it is very true that there's more than one killer in the area over a period of, like, say, a decade. There might be 2 or 3 serial killers killing here or there and everywhere. And these 3 are connected to this group guy, and these 3 are connected to this guy, and those 4 are connected to that guy. And they actually aren't the same guy, but they are similar enough you could have linked them. So unless they're very specifically similar in linking, and this is what happened with the Boston Strangler, the police were like, okay, a whole bunch of, essentially what they were saying, old ladies. Somebody got into their apartment and killed them in this brutal way So it looks like the same guy. They were having trouble to get away from that. So they had to go public at least and say, ladies, be careful. So they overplayed this part that the police weren't doing their job. And then they continued to play that when they said, they did a crappy job. And then, they eventually had, they eventually got together a task force. And yes, maybe they were pressured into the task force, but my God, this is a very difficult situation they were in. They couldn't figure out who did it. They were interviewing person after person after person and came up with so many possible suspects, but no proof, that I'm sure they were going nuts. And that is not unusual for a serial homicide, especially in the days when DNA wasn't a big thing. So they were going crazy because people confess to crimes they don't commit. They look guilty when they're not. And, you can start making connections that aren't there. So there's a whole bunch of problems. And eventually they did have a task force, and the task force worked their butts off and still came up with Jack. Okay. Until DeSalvo. And I'll get to that in a minute. But this is the one thing that really bugged me about this film, is that I can't say the police did a perfect job, but I think they were working their butts off. And the whole thing was about her and how, her boss didn't pay attention to her. And then the police wouldn't pay attention to her. And then the police were just doing a horrifying job, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, okay. And yeah, you're a victim. You're a victim. Not all the women that were killed. Not all the police have spent amazing hours. And there's one more thing that really bugs me. The two ladies, these two ladies were, I would say, intrepid journalists as far as pushing. And they were worked very hard. Worked extremely hard. These are the actresses. These are the real journalists. Worked really hard and eventually wrote these 24 articles. And one of the things they did, which I totally am opposed to, and what the police were opposed to, is they gave, I don't know how they got them. They got so many details of the crimes that, in other words, it would be enough to say these women were murdered in their house, in their apartment, and leave it at that. And there may or may not have been sexual an assault. But they went into massive details on how they were murdered, that they were strangled, that there were multiple scars on their neck, that there was that this is what happened in their apartment. Something was looked at and this was moved. And they went into such details about the crime scene that screws up the police in order to try to figure out if anybody's telling the truth. And one of the problems with Albert DeSalvo's eventual confession was, how much did he get from these two ladies, as opposed to from his own experience? And this is a huge problem. So one of the problems with journalists is that they overstep their job, in my opinion. They're to report the news. They're not there to give up police information to screw up an investigation. So although they were good at their jobs, I'm not particularly pleased with how they did that. And let me tell you, same problem today, that sometimes journalists, for their own needs, to be a great journalist, to be important, to be respected, overstep their bounds and do things that are harmful. And, it can be problematic. And that happens a lot in journalism these days. So it happened back then too. So I just wanted to point that out. So, yeah. So that was one of my issues with this particular movie. Besides every other issue I had with it. Oh my God. Watch the documentary. You'll be a lot better off. Okay, before I go on to explain some of what happened with the women, I just want to check the comments, and then I'm going to go into the theories. All right. I'm not going to go through a real long discussion of every one of the homicides that you can get elsewhere. Let's see. This is a good question. It's weird for a serial killer to target older women. Yes and no. And I'll be getting to that in the issue of Linkage, whether Albert DeSalvo could, because there was this whole group of elderly women, and then there's much younger women and one elderly woman thrown in, if it was the same guy, and would he go from one to the other? Elderly women are usually killed by next door neighbors, like the 17-year-old boy next door, because the elderly woman is theoretically available because the boy next door doesn't have a car and he can walk next door, and maybe he's even done some errands for her. And so he thinks she's also weak. So he goes in to take, to experience killing or raping. So he uses the next door neighbor lady. It's quite amusing, actually, because a lot of times these young serial killers or in grooming for themselves, find out that the elderly women aren't as wimpy as they thought they were. And some of these elderly women beat the crap out of these young men because they're like, you ain't gonna do this to me. Bam. My mother-in-law used to sleep with weights under her pillow. She was disabled, and she lived in a not so great area of Washington, D.C., but she was from Jamaica. She had arms of steel. Swear to God, I couldn't possibly compete with her, arm wrestling. And she kept weights under her pillow because she was concerned about the area she lived in. And I swear to God, if anybody broke in, she would have beat the living crap out of that dude. So some elderly women, disabled women aren't necessarily easy victims, but it often is a young person who has no experience who picks the next door neighbor. So this is very, very true. And this is one of the questions in this case. Is it does this even fit? Well, first of all, the elderly women were all over the place. So we have to keep that in mind. If it were just the next door neighbor, why do we have so many women, elderly? I hate saying that because I think I supposedly am one. Sucks. Anyway, all over the place. It's not the next door neighbor then. It is someone who accessed their location, who had ability to move from location to location. So that's quite interesting. Lila says, murdertainment is unfortunately a moniker, but it's very accurate. It's correct. We're fascinated. And of course, you're here. So, and I'm here. So, maybe calling the kettle black. But anyway, we are fascinated by homicide because we're fascinated by who would do this and then how it happens and how we analyzed it. I'm big on police procedurals because it takes away a lot of the grime and the thrill of watching people be murdered, like slasher films. But but yes, we people, obviously there's a catering to that. The media caters to that more so than ever. But even back in the day, even in the day of Jack the Ripper, the media was all over it. And so same with Boston Strangler. Let me point out, interestingly, about this particular movie. Initially, the crimes were assumed, by the way, this is my Wikipedia reference. Initially, the crimes were assumed to be the work of one unknown person dubbed. This is one thing that this whole movie just drives me crazy about. To be the work of an unknown person dubbed the Mad Strangler of Boston. Interesting. Didn't they call it? It's like a big deal in this movie. They gave him the nickname the Boston Strangler, and that changed everything because nobody else paid attention to it. Not true. This is a lot. Another person was named the Mad Strangler of Boston. On July 8th, 1962, the Sunday Herald wrote that a Mad Strangler was loose in Boston in an article titled Mad Strangler Kills 4 Women in Boston. Not their newspaper. The killer was also known as the Phantom Fiend or the Phantom Strangler because of how he slipped in and slipped out. Not their newspaper. Due to his ability to get women to allow him into their apartments. In 1963, a year later, the two investigative reporters for the Record American, Gene Cole and Loretta McLaughlin, wrote a 4-part series about the killer, dubbing him the Boston Strangler. By the time that DeSalvo's confession had aired in open court, the name Boston Strangler had become part of crime lore. So the basic Boston Strangler that they gave him the name ended up being the final title for the guy who killed all these women. It's not rocket science to call him the Boston Strangler. It was just another, that it stuck is fine. But it's not, to say that it's some kind of incredible thing is just ridiculous. It's just the one that stuck. So, and on top of that, they weren't even, when they were already finished with their articles and moved on before Albert DeSalvo even came around. So all that stuff later on in the film where they were like, she was talking to Albert DeSalvo, it's complete lies. It's just not even true. And it really bugs me because for God's sakes, these women, if you're going to tell their story, tell their story. Don't just make up a bunch of garbage. and make it half true and half fake. Anyway, so that's that. All right. So now the basics of this crime are, all right, between June 14th in 1962 and June 4th, 1964, 13, these are 13 victims, supposedly. And I say supposedly because we don't have actual proof of that. And you have to be careful of this because crimes have been linked together that aren't necessarily absolutely linked. And some people say this very much. They say, well, it's not true. It's like different people. All right. 13 single women between the ages of 19 and 85 are murdered in the Boston area. Most were sexually assaulted. I want to point out sexually assaulted. What does that mean? And I had trouble figuring that out in all of my research. I could not exactly get a clue on what they meant by sexually assaulted. I mean, sexually assaulted can mean everything from rape. It can be vaginal intercourse. It can be anal intercourse. It can be forced oral sex. It can be I played with your boobs. What is it? I kissed you. What is it? And it's very unclear. Or sexually assaulted with an instrument, which is being assaulted in a sexual way. Well, exactly what? And I can't, again, reading the police reports, I'd have to read. I would like to read the police reports. I would like to see the autopsy reports. I'd like to see all of that. And then, even then, it's an opinion. Understand opinions. Very important. All right. So most were sexually assaulted and strangled in their apartments. Police believe that one man was the perpetrator. See, that's an argument over one man or not. But I think in the beginning, and with all the elderly women, it was probably, who else would do this except for one dude? With no sign of forced entry into their homes, the women were assumed to have let their assailant in, either because they knew him or because they believed him to be an apartment maintenance man, delivery man, or other serviceman. And people often say, well, I don't think that person I know, my relative, would let that stranger in. And let me tell you, 90% of the time they're wrong. People let strangers in all the time because you feel like a moron when somebody knocks and says, "Hey, I'm here to check your furnace, or I'm here to check your radiators, or I'm here to fix such and such. There's a leak upstairs." You're living in an apartment. You're like, the last thing you want to do is send that dude away, and then you don't have anybody to fix anything. Should you call to find out if the guy is really the guy? Sure, but most people don't do it. Knock, knock. Hey, it's UPS. Knock, knock. Please. Knock, knock. It's amazing who you let in your house. Okay. So, and I am guilty of that myself. So even as a criminal profiler, I'm pretty, hey, if you're a criminal out there, no, I'm lying. I won't let you in. All right. So the attacks continued despite extensive media publicity after the first few murders. So this was not a hidden thing. This was huge, and the police were just trying desperately to find out who this guy was. Many residents purchased tear gas and new locks, which the police told them to do, and deadbolts for their doors. Some women moved out of the area. The murders also occurred in several cities, including Boston, complicating jurisdictional oversight for prosecution of the crimes. Jurisdictions are an issue because some of these departments don't like to talk to each other. That I have found to be true. That's accurate. And that's why a task force is useful, because it'll bring the jurisdiction information together. Massachusetts Attorney General Edward Brooke, by the way, I think his first Black senator, helped to coordinate the various police forces, which was great. And then he did something stupid. He permitted parapsychologist Peter Hurkos to use his alleged extrasensory perception to analyze the cases, paid for it, for which Hurkos claimed that a single person was responsible. The decision was controversial. Yeah, because it's asinine. Good God. I know the case wasn't being solved, but bringing in the psychic, bad news. And I think as a senator, I actually looked up Brooke, and he seemed like to be a pretty fantastic guy. All around, I really, really like Brooke. I mean, I think he was very reasonable, very rational, cared about everyone. I just think he made this sort of mistake when he said, okay, well, let's try this. Anyway, Hurkos provided a minutely detailed description of the wrong person. So if we go back to the these movies, you will see her coach like show up in the Boston Strangler movie, and it's pretty funny. And he supposedly like puts his hand on the thing and says that's a fake, and they open it up and it's not even part of the case, and he was right. And then he puts his hand on another one and said, "Oh, this is how the woman was found," and he lays on the ground. It's quite amusing. How much do I believe it? Not so much. I just don't, and I don't know how much of this was people's wishful thinking or whatever. But anyway, he supposedly ID'd this guy and was like, oh my God, point, but then not the right guy. But could he have been the right guy? Well, if Albert DeSalvo didn't commit all the crimes, maybe possible. But yeah, I'm not believing it for a minute. And not because that's the wrong, it couldn't be another guy, but because Herkos is, I just think, a big scam artist. But anyway, so the police were not convinced all the murders were the action of one person. So now we have these two sides. One saying it's maybe a couple guys because old ladies, young ladies eventually. And one person saying they're all connected. Okay, so the police had their different opinions. And why shouldn't they? I mean, because you're looking at, this is a very complicated case, which is what we're going to get into in just a second. So at any rate, that's where we are. So now we have DeSalvo. And I'll check your comments out and I'll go on to DeSalvo and some of the issues over the whole case. Both of those movies were awful. You know, I actually I say at least I enjoyed watching this, but I wasn't bored. I did find it kind of like risque for the time because they showed women's boobs and nipples, and I was like, whoa. I was kind of shocked, and for the time, and what I did appreciate was they showed the women being killed, but not in a gruesome way. It showed you what they went through, but not in a way of Criminal Minds, which is disgusting to me. So I sort of liked me. I sort of liked. Did I say me? I sort of liked me. I sort of liked it. I like me too. But was it a great film? I don't know. I'd say that, but it was a boatload better than this piece of. Yes, this is true. Lisa says, despite Ellie warnings, they let him in because of super, a man said so, or supposedly. I think the problem there comes to the fact that a lot of people who live in apartments cannot get the super to listen to the complaints. And if any time there's a complaint, they're so thrilled to have anybody show up. That's when they are willing to let them in. So yeah, that happens a lot. I think that women in those days more readily trusted what men said and listened to them more than today. I would say they do just the same today because again, they need stuff done. And when you need stuff done, you open the door. So, Sarah's more protective of herself. If I didn't invite anyone over, I don't answer the doorbell. Well, there's that. There is that. So, you know, my number one reason I realize that people do what they do is because one night it was like midnight and there was a knock on my door and I couldn't quite see who it was and I opened it up and there was this young man there. He was probably 22 years old or something. No, he couldn't have been 22. So he was a young man standing there and maybe 18, maybe. And I'm like, holy crap, what have I just done? It's midnight and there's this kid out, there's this big guy outside. He was big, he was 18-year-old, but big. And then he asked for my son. I'm like, oh, thank God. But I opened the door at midnight to an unknown guy. So there you go. I'm stupid. So anyway, Michaela says, Ed Kemper killed young co-ed girls as a substitute for his mother, according to his interviews. Ed Kemper was a big fat liar and liked to play with people's minds. Don't believe anything Ed Kemper has to say. As a matter of fact, this is where you have to be careful. Never completely believe what a serial killer psychopath has to say. And this includes DeSalvo. And I'll get into how he's a psychopath. He can be playing with you. He can be manipulating you. He can get himself attention. He can get himself out of things. He can mix things up so you don't know what the truth is. Never believe a psychopath. There's a bunch of bull half the time. All right. So, all right, let me go on. I did just say nipples. I did. We have them, females and men too. All right. That is true. Ed Kemper was a master manipulator, and this is also true. Ed was full of shit. Yeah, and it's important to understand that when you're analyzing these kind of crimes, because we get well, he said this, therefore we have to believe it. Not necessarily so. All right, let's go to Ed DeSalvo and what this whole question is: did he commit the crimes or didn't he? All right, Ed DeSalvo. Let's see who's Ed DeSalvo. Let me pull up Ed. Okay, Ed DeSalvo. Did I just say Ed? I'm not. Sorry, I'm mixing two serial killers. Okay, Albert DeSalvo. I love a live broadcast. You can't fix anything. Oh wait, Albert DeSalvo. DeSalvo was born on September 3rd, 1931 in Chelsea, Massachusetts. And apparently his father was a violent alcoholic who supposedly knocked out his wife's teeth, bent her fingers back until they broke in front of her children. And he does have some brothers and sisters who can at least verify things. A lot of times when serial killers say things, they're lying about their home life because it makes them more sympathetic. So I don't know. I don't know how true it is or how true it isn't. Does that make sense? Anyway, he would also bring home prostitutes and engage in sexual acts in front of them, in front of his wife and young children. Again, I have no proof that this is true. The young DeSalvo began torturing animals as a child. Again, I don't know if it's true. I suppose he took like cats and dogs and stuck them in cages and tortured them. I don't know. And started shoplifting and stealing in early adolescence, frequently crossing paths with the law. All right. All of this stuff prior to his first arrest he was 12 years old, he got arrested. I don't know the accuracy of. I don't, because the family is very protective of him, saying he's really a great guy. Boy, they hiding their heads in a barrel. But anyway, not a great guy. Maybe he didn't hurt them, but he's not a great guy. But what he did, how his family life was, what he did up until 12, I do not know, because I don't have specific proof of any of this. However, 1943, he was arrested for battery and robbery. In December the same year, he kept getting off on things, and he just didn't end up in prison. But then he got sent here to the Lyman School for Boys. All right. And then he got paroled and started working as a delivery boy. And then he returned to the Lyman School for Boys for stealing an automobile. So actually he committed robberies, burglaries, and he violently attacked a newspaper boy to steal his money. Not a nice guy. All right. After completing his second sentence, he joined the U.S. Army. He was honorably discharged after his first tour of duty. Honorably discharged. The Army wanted to get him the hell out of there. They had issues with him and they wanted him gone. But they gave him an honorable discharge, as they often do, just to not have to fight to get rid of him. Happens. I can't tell you how many serial killers have gone through this routine. They actually join the Army, and like 2 years later, they're discharged honorably. And it's just because they don't have to go through a long process. And then he re-enlisted, which is interesting. And in spite of being tried in a court-martial, see, that's how they shouldn't have let him re-enlist. I don't know why they did. DeSalvo was again honorably discharged. DeSalvo served as military police sergeant with the 2nd Squadron. Pictures of DeSalvo being arrested on February 25th, 1967 show him in U.S. Navy dress blue. All right. Yeah. So anyway, when he was over in Germany, he married his wife. And then they came back to the United States. He left the Army after a while. Let's see when it says he left the Army. During that period of time, he sexually assaulted a 9-year-old, and the mother decided not to go through with the prosecution of it because she didn't want her 9-year-old subjected. So when we talk about different ages, 9-year-old, okay. And then he lived with his wife, and he took different jobs in construction and other things like that. So not a great guy, shall we say. All right. Then all these eventually what happened, let me go here a second. So there was a period of time when he was called the measuring man. he would go around because he was good at accessing people's apartments. He'd knock on the door and say, "Hey, I'm here. I'm with a modeling company. Black and White was his modeling company." And he'd come in and he'd measure the women mostly with his hands. Women are stupid. Oh my God, you're so beautiful. The company would like to hire you as a model, and women fall for this. I mean, I can't tell you how many serial killers have used this same ruse, because there's something about for a lot of ladies, especially young women, that meant somebody says they're beautiful and they could become a star. They could become a famous model, a star. That is like candy to them. I mean, it really is. So they will go along with a whole bunch of things which you would not think anybody would go along with. You don't even know this dude. He's saying this. He didn't even seem to have a card with him, even a fake card. And now he's in there touching you, and go change into such and such. I want to see how you, and if I like what you're in, and then I'll take you to, I'll tell the company you're the perfect for it, and you become a star. And sometimes I even slept with them. Unbelievable. So he's called the Measuring Man. And the claim is that he had this sexual appetite his wife couldn't satisfy, that he wanted sex like 4 times a day, 5 times a day. And his wife was like, "I'm done with that crap." And so he masturbated a lot, and she found that, this is my dish towel. Ugh, So supposedly he has a sexual appetite he can't fulfill at home. So instead of paying money for prostitutes, apparently he just goes out and makes up this phony stuff and has sex with these women. That's the theory behind it. Then he is arrested. He ends up in prison for like almost a year. And 2 months after he gets out, the stranglings start happening. So interesting. Does that mean he did it? No, but that's when he came out of prison. And he spent a year in prison, and probably under unpleasant circumstances. And did he develop rage during that time? I don't know, but he came out of prison, and 2 months later, the killing started. All right, so now let's look at the killings themselves. All right, and was it one person? Was it 2 people? Was it even Albert DeSalvo? Now, mind you, there is. I'll get to the DNA evidence later. But so anyway, he did get convicted of this, of the crimes. Why did he get convicted? Let me just tell you why first, and because I want to go into analyzing the crimes and not so much on what happened in the world. Apparently, he was hooked. He was in prison with a guy named Nasser, and Nasser hooked him up with Ethel Bailey, because that was Nasser's lawyer. And he said, "Hey, this dude is confessing to the Boston Strangler crimes." So Ethel Bailey got involved, and eventually DeSalvo confessed to the crimes, but not with the police. They couldn't be used by the police. He did confess with the police. He actually did lots and lots of interviews the police did with him. But supposedly the deal here was, okay, if he confesses to that, we'll get him for something else, but not for those crimes, which is what happened. So let me explain how they got him for other crimes. The reason he was in here with Nasser is because he was found guilty of another set of crimes that were after. Oh, did I just do this? Sorry. Did I leave that up on the screen? Hate it when I do that. All right. Sorry about that. I left this up on the screen and went to something else. I don't see it on my end. I apologize. But this is Nasser and this is Ethel Bailey. So what happened was there was all these crimes. There were like at least 6 of the elderly ladies that were strangled and sexually assaulted in some form. And then there was a 3-month period of time down. And then the young ladies started again. And the young ladies started up. There were like 7. Well, there were actually 7 more murders. 1 was an elderly woman, but 6 were younger ladies. And nobody had a clue again. But DeSalvo was arrested for a different set of crimes called the Green Man crimes. Let me find, where'd he go? Where did my DeSalvo go? I've lost DeSalvo. Oh man, I hate it. This is one of these things that goes wrong on my thing, and all of a sudden I can't find him. What in the world happened to him? He's supposed to be here. Hold on a second. DeSalvo. All right. So DeSalvo was arrested for. There we go. what was called the Green Man. And what happened was, after these murders all occurred, he was out there dressed in a green outfit and going into knocking on doors, but not just measuring them, but then he was actually sexually assaulting them. He would tie them up and sexually assault them and then leave. Not murder them, but leave. But there was repeated incidences of this kind of crime. So he was arrested for that. The women identified him. He ended up in prison for that. But then while he was in prison, he said, oh, by the way, I'm the Boston Strangler. So was he just doing that for attention, or was he doing that because, did he say that because he really was? And it gets very complicated when you look at Nasser and F. Lee Bailey. Were they manipulating him? Was he manipulating them? We don't know. But he eventually confessed and ended up in prison for the rest of his life. Well, which was short because somebody stabbed him to death because whatever reason they did it. And so he was never charged as a Boston Strangler, only for being the guy with the green outfit on. So did he do it or didn't he do it? So now let's get to the profiling part of it. Okay. All right. So there are people who believe that DeSalvo wasn't the guy, that it could have been, as a matter of fact, Nasser, because he was in prison in the mental institution with him, and he was giving him, did he give him information? Did he commit the crimes and give DeSalvo the information? That's one of the theories. There's another theory that this guy was involved. This guy was Charles E. Terry. He committed crimes that people think are similar. He was from Maine, but he came down to Boston on the weekends, and they thought he was convicted as a serial killer, and he had strangled women, and they thought he did it. And at least he did kill older women, so they thought maybe he was the one that killed the older version of the ladies. However, I want to point this out right now. Okay, I don't agree. I don't think his crimes have any bearing on this. I don't think they match. I think it's just one of those things where, he's somebody to look at, but that he did it, not at all. And I'll explain that in a little while, because I just want to go into now the issues of the crimes. All right. Now, I want to start with the FBI profilers, who definitely thought that DeSalvo was not guilty of, they didn't think he was guilty of the crimes, and they also thought there was more than one killer. Now, let me show you what they said. Robert Ressler, who I very much like, a criminologist and former profiler for the FBI, also believes that it's unlikely that one person is responsible for all the Strangler murders. You're putting together so many different patterns here that it's inconceivable behaviorally that all these could fit one individual. Okay, so older people, younger people, Black women, white women. Some were strangled with ligature. Some were strangled with a hand. A couple were anyway. A couple stabbings in there. Some were raped. Some were not. Some were sexually abused. Some maybe not. He thinks there's too many different behaviors. All right, let's look at what John Douglas has to say. There is no evidence that Albert DeSalvo had any knowledge or insight as to the true identity of the Boston Strangler or stranglers. He acknowledged the mystery at the same time, adding to his own mythology and mystique with a poem he composed. Yeah, he wrote a poem and said, "Hey, I'm him." But John Douglas thought, yeah, he knew nothing, really. And here is one of the problems with this whole thing, and I've examined this. One, some of the police officers who interviewed him said he knew things that were not in the newspapers. Two, those journalists put a whole heck of a lot of crap in the newspapers, so he could get a lot from there. Three, one of the police detectives who was interviewing him, I think it was Bottomley, boy, did he give leading questions. He seemed to be manipulating him into saying things. I didn't like his interviews at all. So the question is, this gets very tricky. Did he get stuff from elsewhere and use that for his confessions? Or was he actually there and was using stuff from his own mind for those confessions? How do we know the difference? Theoretically, sometimes it's said from the police investigators that he knew some things that were not in the papers. So how would he know them? Well, that's a good question. Did he get them from Nasser? Did some police people open up their mouths? How did he find this information out? Or was he led to give that information by the police investigators who wanted to nail him? I can't answer. But here's what I do want to talk about. There's this really weird idea that when a person commits this many homicides, that they remember every detail. And so they're like asking him, when he came into the apartment, what was the layout? Where's the living room, the bedroom, the bathroom, the kitchen? What was on the table in the dining room? What was she wearing? What color was the robe? Jesus God, Let me ask you this question. This is straight up. This is a question for you guys and ladies out there. Let's assume you hitting some nightclubs up and you go home with some lady or gentleman and have a good time with them at their apartment. 13 people later, over a period of time, I want to ask you, how many of you could say what the apartment looked like, what the room layout was, what the person you slept with was wearing, and even what you did for sexually? Would you even know what you did sexually? Let me ask you that. I'm going to stop right here. Anybody going to comment? Anybody going to comment? What do you think? Do you think your recollection of 13 different sexual experiences in somebody else's apartment, you would actually remember every single detail of what happened? Stephanie says, I don't even remember the stuff I did yesterday. Exactly. These things are tough. And I've always found it really bizarre that there's an expectation for serial killers. And he says, nope. Your three, doubt my recollection will be exact. So this is a problem. I don't even remember where I laid my sock, says Benny. Gretchen says, what I did sexually at my age, I likely fall asleep. Probably not. I can hide my own Easter eggs. CJ, that's great. That's probably true. Oh my goodness. Only that I was there. Okay, so this is what I'm trying to point out. The fact that we would even believe that a serial killer should remember every single detail of his crime is ludicrous. It's just absolutely ludicrous. I don't know when I talk about myths for this show, that's one of the big myths. There's no way that they necessarily are going to remember everything. Now, some say Albert DeSalvo had a brilliant memory. Now, in other words, somebody could tell him something or he could read something in the newspaper and remember it. Maybe. They said some of the things he said were inaccurate stuff from the newspaper. So therefore, he's making it up. But here's the thing. What if he committed the crime, but then he reads about it in the newspaper and he just adds that crap to it? Because he's a manipulator. So we don't know that what he said has anything to do with whether it's true or it's not true. So I want to get that one out of the way. Whatever Albert DeSalvo said convinced a lot of police that he was the guy. Some others thought, no, he could have gotten it from someplace else. I think that is not absolute proof either way. All right. Now I want to point out something else that became an issue. So we have, and here's another one. Sorry, let me find it. Oh, Safarik, he's another profiler with the FBI, pointed out another fact that undermines the belief that the Boston Stranglings were serial killings committed by the same person. White offenders offend almost exclusively against white females. They don't cross the racial barrier. Black females who are killed, again, almost exclusively by black men. Garbage. That has been disproven a long, long ago. The racial issue, now serial killers often are racist, they'll take anybody they can kill. The reason that white men killed white women because they killed in their neighborhoods. Most serial killers don't go far. They know the neighborhood, so they stay within a mile. So you got some but once upon a time, all white people lived here, all black people lived there. So black killers killed black women and white killers killed white women. But over time, when there was more mixing, hey, you knock on the door and a black woman opens up the door. What do you care? So that is nonsense. So that does not prove different killers. Okay, so what we have still is we don't know if DeSalvo told the truth or not about the killings because, again, as I said, he's a manipulator. He could be making stuff up. He could be actually faking stuff that isn't, just putting stuff in there to mess him up, to make them think he didn't commit the crimes. He couldn't remember. He could have borrowed things from the newspaper. Who the heck knows? So we're still at kind of ground zero there. All right, let's look at some other reasons why it would be more than one person. All right, Susan Kelly, who wrote the Boston Stranglers, wrote this. The press contention was that the murders were identical in method. They were not. No similarity would ever exist between the relative delicate killing of Patricia Bassett. She was found in a bed and had the sheets were pulled up over her, like the murderer tucked her into the bed. And the ghastly homicidal violation inflicted on Mary Sullivan, the last crime, whose killer's intent was not just to degrade his victim by shoving a broom handle into her vagina, but to taunt the discoverer of her corpse by placing a greeting card against her foot. Interestingly, this is the one that Albert DeSalvo is linked to by DNA. So keep that in mind. Beverly Salmons was stabbed but not sexually assaulted. Not sexually assaulted. Okay. And I want to stop here for a second. What does sexually assaulted mean, by the way? Again, what does it mean? Because sexual assaults can be rape, or they can be oral sex, which may, if the guy doesn't ejaculate and doesn't leave semen there, may not even be recognized as even having happened. A guy can jack off. He can enjoy looking at the scene and jack off, which, interesting enough, in the last crime, that's where DeSalvo's DNA was found, was on a blanket. And his wife said he kept jacking off everywhere. Right? So if he jacked off on a blanket, it doesn't mean it's not sexual crime. And then I want to point out one other thing about sexual crimes. And people don't often want to pay attention to this either. I think this is it. I actually Googled this on my computer. What was the size of Albert DeSalvo's penis? My Google searches might put me in prison. I swear to God. I Google a lot of really weird crap in order to be able to understand certain crimes. Let me ask the question again. What was the size of Albert DeSalvo's penis? Why would I even Google that? Can anybody tell me? That's okay. Stephanie says stabbing is a de facto sexual assault sometimes. I don't know that I believe this crap. The claim is that every time you stab, it's like a penetration with a penis. I think that's more profiler bull crap. I don't see there's any great truth to that. I think it's just, I don't know whose mind that is. If you go like this over and over again, you're like, it's like intercourse with a knife. I've never found truth in that. Let's see. There we go. Little penis. Small. Compensation. Okay. Just to be realistic, I looked that up because this is important information. Was a dude hung? Weenie. Which one is it? Because there are women who, if they're having sex with a man and he starts to penetrate them, go, oh crap, stop. Oh, slow down. Because the dude is big. And then there's other women who go, oh, are we having sex? Did you start? Because I didn't notice. And that's because they're little. Sorry, guys. It's just a reality. That's the way it is. Okay. I don't know. So the question sometimes is, how do they determine that someone has been raped? How do they determine whether they've had a vaginal sexual assault or not? Or even an anal assault? How do they know this? Well, if there's semen left there, then you know. But without the semen, how do you know? And, sometimes maybe the guy can't get it up at a certain moment. So there's all these reasons why you might not be able to determine actual sexual intercourse. And I think that's to be important because a lot of the older women, DeSalvo actually said he did have sex with, but supposedly there was nothing left physically. So they didn't determine it was a rape. But I don't know that it wasn't, or he just didn't, if it was him, he just like, yeah, well, okay, it was fun to kill him, but they really didn't turn me on. Who knows? Who knows? Bruising. Well, bruising. Well, okay, sorry. Bruising. Well, if you're big enough, if you're small enough, there ain't no bruising. That's just the way it is. Benny, this is just good, solid Saturday night entertainment. I'm glad you think so. That's a good point too. Getting sexual satisfaction from rubbing against someone, that's frauderism. Yes, that could be too. So you could, but how do you prove it happened is the question. And so a lot of times when we look at sexual assaults, we don't know that the sexual assaults. We guess, but we actually do not know. So that's a problem. And I could not get that information of how well hung he was. And I just couldn't get it. So that is important information when you're trying to analyze a crime. All right. I just want to bring that one up. Now, so we have 3 FBI persons, profilers, who say they do not believe that, well, 2 of them say they don't believe it's the same person that committed all the crimes. And we have John Douglas, who doesn't believe DeSalvo committed the crimes. All right. Now, I want before I go on to actually permanently really analyzing the crime, I want to point out the biggest myth of all. And this one bugs the heck out of me. All right. Now, it's this fact. The strangler's signature was to tie a victim's stocking around her neck in a bow. I looked at my book I wrote in 2003, Killing for Sport, and I said in it, well, signatures are rare, but the Boston Strangler was one person that had that signature because he tied people's neck in a bow. I was very new as a profiler, and I wrote this book early on, and I believed what was said in the media, and it was garbage. That is not a fact. And I'm like, no, embarrassed I had it in the book, but it's not a fact, which I learned this time. So here's a picture of one of the victims. Does that look like a bow to you? Okay. Let me show you a couple examples, and I'm going to do a crime scene demonstration here. All right. Let's see where I'm at. Okay. Anne Slacers was found, her body sprawled on the bathroom. She had been molested. Again, what the heck is molested? Okay. The cord of her bathrobe was knotted around her neck and tied in a bow beneath her chin. Okay. But then look at this. This is from the Boston Strangler book. Look at the dark area here. The blue cloth cord of her housecoat had been knotted tightly under her chin, its end turned up so that it might have been a bow. Might have been a bow. They didn't say they made a bow like this, she strangled, and I'm going to show you this. All right. I think they didn't, I don't know if they had pantyhose back then. But we don't use regular, those things with the garters anymore. Okay, so here's some hose. Now you're strangling me. This is what that book is describing. Is that a bow? Or is it fact when you finish strangling somebody, you might go like this and it looks like a bow? I don't see that there was evidence from the second one that he went like this. That's a bow. If this wasn't on the woman, then that's not a bow. That's your imagination. That it looks like a bow. Okay, like this. Let me get it done here. It looked like a bow. Yeah. Okay. So now we have which is true. I don't know. Now let's look at this one. Nina Nichols was found strangled in a Brighton apartment. She had been sexually molested. Again, we don't really know what that means. Tied around her neck were 2 nylon stockings, the ends tied neatly in a bow. But let's go here. Nina Nichols. Look at the bolded. The ends of the stockings had been arranged on the floor, so they turned up on either side like a grotesque bow. Again, are we back at the same thing again? That they're just looking like this and aren't really tied in a bow? Isn't that crazy? Now look at this one. Helen Blake was found strangled and molested inside her Lynn home. Wound around her neck were a bra and nylons tied in a bow. Okay, let's look. Now, this actually is in the Boston Strangler book. A nylon stocking but twisted with ferocious strength around her neck and knotted just at the nape. Her cotton brassiere had been looped under the stockings, and then its ends brought forward and tied in a flamboyant bow under her chin. Okay, I'm going to try this one. All right. All right. I've been viciously strangled with this. Okay. But this is not a bow. Then, check this out. Okay. This is not a young woman, and she's not that small. So I'm going to say she's got a major bra here. All right. So now, somehow this is actually underneath here somehow. And now it's going to be tied into a bow. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. I got to work this out here. Okay. I'm sorry, I cannot make a bow out of this. Is that what you call a bow? It's just tied. I mean, this is not a bow. It just hangs there. I mean, because there's no way you can make a bow. I've never seen how you can make a bow with a bra because the ends are not long enough. They're too darn short. So all you can do is tie it and leave it like this. Okay, is that flamboyantly a bow, or did you just tie the damn thing and leave it hanging? So, in my opinion, there's no proof that any of the women actually had a bow around their darn necks. I think that's the imagination of the detectives and the writers. So this signature, which was supposed to show, which I thought when I wrote the book, that each one of these women had a bow, like literally tied like this. And if that were true, then it would, okay, that's kind of weird. A guy's actually, after he finishes killing her, he actually makes a pretty little bow. But strangling somebody and leaving the ends hanging is not a bow. It's just the way things end up. That is not a signature in any way, shape, or form. So this is just unbelievable to me that became the whole thing about the Boston Strangler. Maybe the police think knots are bows. I don't know. It's bizarre. Yeah, it makes no sense. At all. And that to me takes away when you're trying to connect all of these crimes and you say everybody has a bow. You either have one signature and then you have a copycat who's doing that exact signature. But in fact, we have none of that. So it's all nonsense. Try to create a signature for good reading. Yes. All right. So this is a problem. So we can get rid of the signature thing altogether. And let me read you something from my book. This is Killing for Sport. The signature stuff was correct. The fact that I thought once upon a time it was actually a bow on all these women's necks with Albert DeSalvo is just not true. A signature, a nifty little mystical notion that leads to the psyche of the serial killer and the single biggest myth ever created by profilers in Hollywood about serial killers. All right, let's differentiate MO from signature. Now, MO is modus operandi or method of operation. And MO is defined as this: the elements of a crime necessary to accomplish it. All right. So in other words, somebody got into the houses of these ladies or the apartments. That's an MO. So there are certain things, a ruse is used or breaking in is used. That's an MO. Okay. The signature is supposed to be this: added touches that make the crime personal to the killer, like special brush strokes or color choices of an artist. Like, Monet was an impressionist. That was his thing. But mind you, again, Monet had different periods of his life where he changed his style of painting. So even that, it was a period of time where he used something, but it doesn't mean he always used that either. So you got to be careful that just because somebody does something for a while doesn't mean it's a permanent thing. And that's one of these myths of signature that was put out, which I totally disagree with. Hollywood usually portrays signature rather blatantly. Diapers in the mouth of the victim, eyeball removal, a different biblical reference in every crime, or initials carved in the woman's forehead. So, yeah, most of the time, women are, there's hardly any signature at all because most crimes, serial crimes, look the same. strangling, being hit over the head, knifing, rape, left in the bushes, left dead in the house. It's only the very rare ones that have a signature, and it's very, very unusual. And then again, does it ever change? And do they do it at every crime? And the answer to that is no, they don't. So they might have a fun time at one crime doing something particularly unique. Denny Rolling was like that. One crime, he cut the woman's head off and stuck it on the table looking at the door, on the bookshelf, looking at the door. So when the police opened up, oh my God, and they take pictures and it would be like really cool. But he never did that with any of his other crimes. So that was not a signature that went from crime to crime to crime. It was just something that amused him at the time. There were other things that were more likely what you could call signature, and I'm going to get to this in how I analyze this crime. There's MO and there's signature. MO is just doing what you need to do. Signature is a way of doing things that may be consistent. It may be from your head, or it may just be a consistency. That's my personal opinion of that. Now, the other thing I want to talk about is there is a statement made by, let's see if I can get to her statement yet. The concept of somebody, this being a multiple different murderers. Hold on a second. All right. Hold on a second. That's not what I want. Hold on. Let me find it. That's not Gerald Frank. Hold on. Okay. It must be back up here. Oh, come on. Where'd it go? Okay, here we are. Okay. Susan Kelly talks about, she's the Boston Stranglers writer. She talks about the MO. So now we have the signature not being all that much of a signature as far as the bows go. Let's look at what Kelly has to say about the method of operation, MO. The press contention was that the murders were identical in method. They were not. No similarity would ever exist between the relatively delicate killing of Patricia Bissett, whose murderer tucked her into bed, and the ghastly homicidal violation inflicted on Mary Sullivan, whose killer's intent was not just to degrade his victim by shoving a broom handle into her vagina, but to taunt the discoverer of her corpse by placing a greeting card against her foot. Oddly enough, she totally thought Albert DeSalvo didn't do this crime, and yet his DNA was found at this one crime. So that's interesting. Now, is tucking her into bed or brutally attacking somebody MO, or is it signature? Is it something they have to do to commit the crime, or is it something they just enjoy? Okay. And this is an issue. And there's a lot of times you can argue over whether it's signature or MO, and sometimes there's no proof it's one or the other. That's a problem. Let's say, trying to think of a normal thing in life. Let's say a guy, one time he's really sweet and gentle, and another time he's rough. What does that mean? Two different people or two different circumstances? And I'm not talking about rape I'm not talking about rape. I'm just talking about normal sexual stuff. Is it circumstances? Was one time he was drinking and one time he wasn't drinking. One time the girl was real reluctant, so he was really slow. Another time the girl was into it, so he was really fast. I mean, is that MO or is that signature, or is it neither one of them? So you got to be careful about this stuff. Beverly Sammons was stabbed but not sexually assaulted, or was she? We don't know. Joanne Graff was raped vaginally and strangled. Evelyn Corbin had performed, probably under duress, oral sex on her killer. Jane Sullivan was dumped face down to rot in a bathtub. Urga was left in the living room with her legs spread and propped up on a chair. These are hardly identical modus operandi. Nor does the fact that the women who died by strangulation were garroted by articles of their own clothing point to a single killer. Virtually every adult woman owns hosiery, brasiers, blouses, scarves, or bathrobes with tie belts. All of these provide excellent and readily available ligatures for killers, particularly one who doesn't wish to be observed carrying a murder weapon to the scene. The copycat factor is vividly demonstrated in the case of Mabel St. Clair, an elderly woman who was found dead on the floor of her Lynn apartment. She had been strangled to death. The murder weapon was a stocking found around her neck. The immediate suspect in the case was a young Boston woman who was found outside her apartment shrieking hysterically. Okay, so you can always have a crime that has some resemblance to another crime, but is not the person who, that committed the other ones. Now, let's talk about MO. And my favorite example comes from this book, and it's called Spoken in Darkness. I read this book years ago, and it really opened my eyes to the MO issue. So let me explain this guy to you, and then you'll see why you got to be really careful about MO as well. All right, let me find it. What did I do with it? Okay, hold on. Where? I just had it in my hand. Oh, here we go. All right. Do serial killers commit their crimes the same way every time? Because again, is it modus operandi? You always do the same thing. For example, a serial killer's MO might be that he abducts women from cars in a shopping center, takes them to a secluded park and using a gun, ties them up, rapes them, and strangles them with a cord, then leaves their body in the bushes. The car, the gun, the rope, the strangulation, and the dumping of bodies are considered the things this killer must do to commit this sexual homicide. This then, according to a static MO theory, and now they have said that it does change over time when you find things don't work, right? That he's going to do this every time. Nonsense. There are 3 reasons why it's not likely to be true. It's boring. Nobody can do something over and over without becoming a little bored with the sameness. Even when a normal person, and you don't have to admit this here, has a particular favorite sexual fantasy with specific elements, he tends to change the characters, locations, and props just a bit each time to enjoy his particular fantasy in a new scenario. So, if anybody looks over their whole sexual history, if you haven't had just one, well, even if you had one person in your life, you might find that things change over time, that you try different things, that you try different places, different because you get bored, you know. It's like eating the same food every day. Some people do, but a lot of people say, I cannot eat the same dang thing again. I got to have something new. And like me, I like to try every restaurant that ever existed. I like every cuisine. But other people aren't. But so when you take a serial killer, they're not different from human beings because they are human beings. They do things like anybody else. So if people go and have sex with girlfriends or boyfriends or go to bars and pick people up, they don't have the exact same sexual experience every time. And sometimes they try new things because they're getting bored. All right. Also, a serial killer would do the same, adding or eliminating elements of his crime to suit his fancy. So it's not a programmed killing machine. Also, sometimes they're lazy or they're wildly creative. The killer who likes to con a woman into his van by asking her to help him change a tire might get bored one day and just jog her over the back of the head. Likewise, a cowardly bop and drop killer, I call him bop and drop, might try and convince the victim he's the telephone repairman and kill her in her own home. So that can even change that much so that you get confused. And then there's a natural progression. You try one thing, it doesn't work, you try something different. Okay? Now, I want to tell you, this is the guy that opened my eyes to everything. His name was Gary Taylor. And that's the one that was in the book. A great example is someone who seemed to change course consistently. He began his career by whacking women over the head at bus stops. Then he started shooting them with a rifle through their bedroom windows. He got caught and put away in a mental institution at this point. But when he was out on a pass after learning some good social skills, he posed as an FBI agent and obtained entrance to the victim's apartments. On the next pass, he bought some machetes and attacked a woman on the street. When he got out of the institution, he got married, and with more training from his social training from his wife, he continued with a variety of ruses. After his divorce, he invited a couple of prostitutes to his house, where they ended up being buried in his backyard. His ex-wife finally ratted him out, and when the police started hunting him, he reverted to more of a bop and drop style, raping and not bothering to kill his victims. What's his MO? I don't know. Does he have one? He's done everything. He uses all kinds of weapons. He uses all kinds of methods. He killed, he raped, he hit him, he raped him, he didn't rape him, he killed him, then he went back to raping. I don't know. So when you get into a narrow tunnel vision of this is the way things work, this is not the way human beings actually work. So Yes, the MO, this Kelly claims changed to some extent. True. And the victims changed. True. What does that mean? Does it mean multiple killers, two killers, or one killer who's changed his dang mind? So that's where I'm going to go with now. Let's take a look at some of the other issues here. Hold on a second. Okay, we did that. All right. Now, I want to go back up to the other suspects. Okay. If multiple people are involved in these crimes, the number one multiple is Nasser, and that was a guy who never was arrested for rape or any sexual assault. He was a killer. He killed somebody who shot them, and he hung out with DeSalvo. And some people think he was the guy and gave DeSalvo all the information. There's no evidence of this. There's no evidence he was ever involved in any of the crimes. So this is just one of those guess things. But we have a better possible extra suspect, and that's this guy that I mentioned before. Now, let me tell you about him and why it doesn't match the crimes, although people seem to think it could be this guy. His name is Charles Terry, okay? Charles Terry, standing 6'5". He was dishonorably discharged from the Marine Corps because he is a serial killer and a psychopath, mind you. And while incarcerated, he was arrested and convicted of stealing a vehicle while he was on leave from the military. While incarcerated, he alleged he was raped by other inmates. Okay. So let's see. 3 months after his release, the now 21-year-old assaulted two women on the same evening in Kennebec County, raping one of them. All right. And then he went, let's see what happened. He just drew obscene pictures. Then he came out of jail. I guess he got married. He brokered. And then he was, the following year, he assaulted a main woman in her 50s. This is where the thing comes in, where he's into older ladies for assaulting. Broke her jaw in two places and cut her scalp. Then he served his sentence in a Maine state prison, diagnosed as an intelligent psychopath with a sexual sadism disorder. No, I'm okay with that. Okay, so the wife just divorced them. Then they hung about again. They had a kid. He had several jobs, blah, blah, blah. Now, his murders. Let's do his murders. In 1951, he killed Shirley Coolin. She was 24, strangled with her own scarf in a flower garden. I want to point out two things. Strangled with her scarf, one scarf, in a flower garden, which is outside, not inside an apartment. Then he killed Patricia Wing. Oh no, they thought somebody else did it, but then they thought maybe Terry did it, but we don't know that that's true. Okay, now Donna Kimmy was strangled in Kenner. She was Kenner, Louisiana. Terry would later tell investigators he had been to New Orleans in that month, but so what? That's not proof of anything. Then Zenobia Clegg. This guy supposedly killed Zenobia Clegg, a victim of cancer who wore scarves to cover the surgical scars on her neck, and had arranged to have sex at a hotel there. So supposedly he went to a hotel to meet with her and have sex. And he strangled her with a scarf while on the bed, tying it into a bow afterwards, which I don't know is even true. And which, again, Boston Strangler didn't really actually tie bows, as far as I can see. After that, he sexually assaulted her naked body with a liquor bottle. Oh, because, in some of the Boston crimes, there was a theory that they were attacked with a liquor bottle. Posing the body, which also happened in some of the crimes, in a sexual manner, before leaving the premises. Okay. And then he placed a pear next to the victim's right leg. Okay. But he went on a date with her, essentially, and then lost his temper. That's what he claims anyway. So they went to a hotel. This wasn't an apartment complex, it was a hotel. Again, different from the locations in the Boston crimes. That's it. And supposedly he visited Boston. So I'm going to say there's nothing that links him in any particular way, except he strangled a woman with her scarf. Big deal. Lots of women get strangled with a scarf or somebody's hands. That's not a huge piece of information. So now let's get down to DeSalvo. All right. That's one of the things he said. I left her on the side of her bed with her head hanging down, her two breasts exposed. He He was very believable to the police officers who interrogated him, took his confession and all that. Now I want to just jump back up here to the DNA thing. Hold on a second, let me find it. Oh, where'd I put it? Okay, there's a DNA thing somewhere here. Where did I put it at? Hold on a sec, I gotta find it. Okay, it's here somewhere. Okay. Hold on. I got I can't read these, they're too small. Okay, here we go. Back quite a ways back, all right, like in 2000, was it 2001? A team of forensic scientists who exhumed the body of Mary Sullivan, that's the last girl murdered, over a year ago, revealed that tests on her clothing and remains found DNA from 2 individuals other than Sullivan. Okay, so, and they also, neither finding was a match for Albert DeSalvo, whose body was exhumed 6 weeks ago. So once upon a time, they thought it wasn't DeSalvo because the DNA did not match on the last victim. Then, more than a decade later in 2013, they determined that there was semen on a blanket of Mary Sullivan's rape and murder that did match him. And therefore, he at least strangled one of the victims. Now, he was never charged with any of the others, and there's no proof he actually killed any of the others. So what we have here now is DeSalvo, supposedly DNA connects him to the last of the 13 women, Mary Sullivan. But it didn't before. Now, one thing that Dr. Grande points out is, do we believe it? Do we believe that the test is accurate? And I'm going to give him credit on that because I don't know. Just because somebody says there was a test done and the test is accurate, I don't see the reports. I don't know why they're saying this. I don't know who did it. I don't know who determined it. I don't know anything about it. And a lot of times we believe something that's said by an organization. They've determined this, therefore it is true. I want to see the evidence, and I haven't seen it. I don't even know if it's ever been presented because we're not going to a court of law. There's not a defense attorney to say that's not his DNA. So we actually don't know. So either it's not his DNA and maybe he never committed any of the Boston Stranglings. Maybe he just committed the measuring man before where he touched up the women and the green man after where he tied up the women and raped them and said sometimes, I'm sorry, and left and never killed them. Maybe, as his boss said, he's a really nice guy and he's so soft and sweet. That's what his family thinks. He's a soft and sweet guy, even though he rapes women and ties them up and terrifies them and tortures them by raping them. But okay, maybe he never committed any of the Boston Strangler crimes. He just committed the ones before and after that were sexual assaults, but not murder. That's if we believe that the DNA may not be accurate. But what if the DNA is accurate, that he actually did commit the crime of Mary Sullivan? Mary Sullivan's crime was brutal. She was raped. She had a broomstick put up inside her. It was a pretty sick crime. So Mr. Nice Guy, who only nicely rapes women and never kills, if he did Mary Sullivan, it was a brutal, vicious, sick murder. And therefore, could he have committed the other murders? Okay. Now, there are some who think he absolutely did. Let's see who they are. Phil DiNatale, lead investigator of Boston Strangler Task Force, said he believed that DeSalvo, his prime suspect in the case, was guilty. He spoke to DeSalvo numerous times and said that DeSalvo was able to provide him with intricate details about the case that no one else knew. DiNatale wanted DeSalvo to stand trial as a strangler and blamed competing political interests for the ultimate decision to convict DeSalvo on lesser charges instead. To this day, people say that he isn't the strangler. For what reason, I do not know, DiNatale said. They can say he isn't in one sentence, but I can produce document after document for days and days and show you that he is. And what about the journalist, the protagonist of the most recent film? They kind of make it look like she wasn't too sure who done did it. But this is what she said. The killer, I am convinced, was Albert DeSalvo, no question. All right. So I want to present to you this issue. Is there anything linking these crimes together in the MO and in the supposed signature? Not the bull crap, but the MO and the signature. All right, let's take a look at some of the MO. MO. Whoever killed all 13 and maybe 12, because one of them I'm a little questionable, but anyway, 13 of them, the elderly women and the younger women, all accessed their apartments without any obvious signs. Somebody knocked on the door and was let in, and he does say occasionally he used like a tool to get in, but generally speaking, not got into their apartments. It was not in the middle of the night. Like somebody broke in and in the middle of the night and came through the window or something like that. This is somebody who accessed their apartments fairly easily, either through a ruse or through some burglar techniques. And he was a burglar, mind you. Serial killers are often burglars as well. So that doesn't take him out of the picture. And he also used ruses. So he used burglary and ruses. And these crimes all look like either burglars or rusers. And they all happened at a time of day when he was available. So he was available for every one of the crimes, coming out of work, stopping by. He knocked on lots of doors, and whoever opened it, he went after. Now, so therefore, so that the MO of entering the locations was very similar. And if now some people think he only committed the last 6 crimes, starting with the young one, the black woman who was younger and attractive. And so he only committed the last ones, but not the elderly women. But yet, oddly, somebody accessed the elderly women exactly the same way as they accessed the younger women. So that MO is actually very much the same. The other things that were very similar is that they were mostly sexually assaulted in one way or the other. Okay. How they were sexually assaulted is questionable. Some raped, something else. His wife said he wanted sex all the time, and if he didn't get sex, he masturbated. Could well be the person did the same thing. Now, we will talk about the fact of the older women as opposed to the younger women. Why would he go for elderly women and then change to younger women? Well, this is the problem with people changing their MOs or their targets depending on where they are in their lives. So I can't, it could look like 2 different people, but I also can't eliminate that it's one. Because yes, if this is a guy that after he got out of prison, after doing the measuring man stuff and he's touching up all the ladies, he gets out of prison and he's all pissed off at life. And he knocks on a door and an elderly woman answers and he goes, I'm going to do this. Maybe he starts with elderly women because he thinks they're easier. Maybe because he thinks he can get away with it, that nobody's going to care, or that it's easy to kill an elderly woman. He wants to try it out. So he does. We don't know how many doors he knocked down or how many he peeked in. We don't know. But did he start with elderly women because maybe he even thought, I shouldn't mess with the younger pretty women. I mean, I like them and I don't want to kill them, but the older women I don't give a crap about. So let me try them. And then after he tried them for a while, and then there was a 3-month interlude where nothing happened. Maybe he came back and said, "Hey, I'm ready for the young'uns now, and now I'm going to knock on the door when a young one answers. I'm going to have my way with her. I'm going to do what I really do it. The way I really want to do it." Can I say that's not true? No, because if you're going to say a serial killer can only behave in an exact way, that's not true. They can change just like anybody can change. So that maybe he did use the older women as early killing grounds and then went on to the younger women because that was more pleasing. I do not know. There was also more evidence of rape with the younger ones, which means that he could have not been as attracted to the older ones as far as actual touching and being that close to. Maybe he just wanted to kill him and masturbate, and that he was done with that. And later on, he's like, I want to do the rape thing too, but I kind of prefer a hotter chick. I can't say that's not true. So, but I want to point out the most telling thing to me that makes me think it is entirely possible that Albert DeSalvo did commit all of these crimes. And I think I'm going to use Benny's statements here. Thank you, Benny. Benny put a victim list together, and I want you to hear something that's, you tell me what is the same on so many of these crimes. Anne Slessors, she's 56, sexually assaulted with unspecified foreign object, non-fatally strangled with a belt, and then fatally strangled with a bathrobe cord. Mary Mullen, this is one died of a heart attack, and he claimed she just died before he could do anything. We'll ignore her. Nina Nichols, sexually assaulted with a wine bottle, fatal ligature strangulation with one nylon stocking, 2 more post-mortem nylon stockings tied around her neck. I'm going to ignore the Anna Bow because I don't think that's true. That's from the news people. Okay, so basically we have so far Anna Slessors strangled with a belt and then fatally strangled with a bathrobe cord. Nina Nichols, strangulation with 1 nylon stocking and 2 more post-mortem nylon stockings. Helen Blake, raped and fatally strangled with nylon stockings. Another nylon stocking and bra tied around her neck post-mortem. Ida Erga, raped and manually strangled. A pillowcase around her neck post-mortem. Jane Sullivan, raped and fatally strangled with nylon stockings. Sophie Clark, raped and fatally strangled with nylon stockings. Petticoat wrapped around the neck post-mortem. Patricia Bessette, this is one, Sophie Clark was started the young ones, okay? But starting with the young ones, raped and fatally strangled with interwoven nylon stockings, blouse also tied around the neck. Mary Brown, this is the one older one that's thrown in here. I have a question about that one. I don't know that was Boston Strangler. No ligature involved. She was stabbed with a fork and bludgeoned with a pipe. I think that may be not his. Beverly Sammons, another one of the young ones, raped, stabbed 4 times in the neck, 22 times in the torso, 2 scarves and 1 nylon stocking tied around the neck post-mortem. Evelyn Corbin, she was an older one too. Okay. Raped, forced to perform oral sex, and fatally strangled with 2 nylon stockings. Joanne Graff, raped, beaten, fatally strangled with nylon stockings. Black leotard, wrapped around the neck post-mortem. Last one, Mary Sullivan, age 19, sexually assaulted with a broom handle, forced to perform oral sex, fatally strangled with a nylon stocking, 2 scarves around her neck post-mortem. What do you know that is the same with almost all of these crimes? Can anybody tell me? This is true, by the way. It seems like the killer used clothing in the home or an item in the home for convenience sake. He didn't have to bring anything. That is very true. He did not bring a rope, or he didn't have to, do that. There we go, Stephanie. Thank you very much. Multiple items used to strangle, and Sarah says post-mortem stuff. They were already killed with an item in the home, which is not that unique. But what was the very unique things? And it's the 2 unique things. Lots of post-mortem interaction, true, but what was done post-mortem that didn't necessarily need to be done? If you want to go with signature, what didn't need to be done post-mortem? What was it? What was it? He liked to play with dead women, Dandini says. Okay, watch this. What do you notice? There, nylon stockings, yes. Clothes around the neck, yes. There we go. Added more stockings, adding more things around the neck. Yes. Even post-mortem, he added blouses, pillowcases, just kept adding crap around the neck, which is quite unusual, I might add, because once you strangled somebody with something, you really don't need to do all that extra work now, do you? So There was some posing too. This is true. But the main thing that stuck out to me in all of these crimes was the number of ligatures that he added for no good freaking reason. And I find that really fascinating, because if the original Boston Stranglers, people think the original one with the elderly ladies did that. And I know some of the stuff was in the newspapers and all that, but it's still a very unique thing that then this guy would go to kill one woman and do the same thing. Or he'd start with Sophie, the black woman, and start imitating the first guy and do all the extra strangulation things. That is not exactly the way things usually work. That he would commit a rape and strangle and think, oh, people are going to take that for the, for the Boston Strangler. But it's very odd, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to me, because all across all of these crimes, that double ligature, triple ligatures and stuff, blouses around the neck, pillowcases around the neck, a whole bunch of crap that is entirely not usual in a sexual homicide. I mean, I've looked at sexual homicides for many, many years. And do I see ligatures? Absolutely. But I haven't seen this layering of ligatures that often in every single freaking crime. So to me, that is a signature. If you're going to go with a signature, that it is, not the stupid bull crap, but the MO that this somebody or two people went into the apartment without any kind, like breaking in the windows or anything like that. They got in and they all used this triple thing. And apparently lots of masturbation and other weird stuff. I find it hard to believe that there were two separate killers right at the same time who were so similar in their behaviors at the crime scene. The only difference I see in any of this is elderly versus younger. That's the only difference I see. So if this is DeSalvo's DNA really was at the last crime scene, and he did the triple ligature thing and the posing and all the things that he did at that scene, this isn't Mr. Nice Guy. This is a violent, vicious, psychopathic serial killer. And there's no reason why he couldn't have killed the elderly women and gone on to the younger women. There's no reason at all he couldn't have done that. And as far as knowing all the details, as I said, it's hard to say. He could have made up stuff. He could have been telling the truth. He could have borrowed things from the newspaper. He could have forgotten stuff. He's a psychopath. Understand that. There in the end of the Boston Strangler movie from 1968, they have him totally psychotic. And one of the psychiatrists actually says when he committed his crimes, he was a split personality, so he didn't actually know what he did. Garbage. This guy had a steel trap for a mind. So he knew what he was doing. And just because he took care of his wife and two children, if you look at all of these, many of these serial killers over time, we see that they have lives with their wives and then go out and kill and come right back home and have dinner. And they, Dennis Rader, people point him out a lot because he seemed like he cared about his wife and kids, but yet he was out brutally raping and murdering women. So just because he's nice at home doesn't mean he's nice out there when he's committing the crimes he's committing. That's what he enjoys doing. That's what he gets his kicks out of. So, and when we look at changing things, well, he was the measuring man, and all he did was touch women. And he used a ruse to get in. He touched women, and then he left. But then he committed the Green Man crimes. And what was he doing there? He was getting in one way or the other and raping and tying up the women, and he was brutalizing them. So he couldn't be the Boston Strangler because he was nice when he did the measuring man, but he wasn't nice when he did the green guy. So he was brutal then, and also tied women up, which is similar to all of the Boston Strangler murders. The women were tied up; they were strangled. The only thing he added was the homicide. The rest of it. And, again, I've pointed out somebody can go from murder back to rape. Now, why would he do that if it were true? Why would he stop doing the murders and go back to rape and rape alone? There's always a number of reasons. One is he could have just gotten tired of it. He could have become worried that he was going to leave evidence at the scene that he wasn't comfortable with. It's really hard to say. He got over himself. I don't know. But that, the fact is, if his DNA was at the last Boston Strangler crime, he is the kind of guy who can murder and rape and murder brutally and stage and do all these things. And then if that was him, why did the murders stop? Because if that was him doing the murder, why didn't he murder again? Because you can't, either the DNA is a lie or the DNA is accurate, and he then therefore absolutely did not continue murdering. Then you could say, well, that was his one-off murder. He just wanted to do one staged murder just for the kicks of it. And that's pretty rare. I mean, it's like, okay, I've never done any murders before, but this one time I'm going to do it such a way that's just like the Boston Strangler, but I'm not going to do it again. I mean, not likely. And I go back to the multiple ligatures and the postmortem ligatures, just excessive. Yeah. That I find very unlikely to be more than one person. I certainly don't believe there are like 3 or 4 people involved in multiple things. The most I could come up with is possibility of 2 different killers. And he's starting with the younger one. But then if he did all the younger ones, I don't see why I couldn't have done the older ones, especially since everything matches. The MO matches, the signature that I pointed out matches, and the timing matches. I'm good with DeSalvo. I'm good with DeSalvo doing all of them. And I really, when I started out investigating this, I didn't think I'd necessarily come to that conclusion, but I'm good with him being the one and only Boston Strangler. So let me see what you have to say here. Okay. Let's say, I'm trying to go backwards here now. Want to hide those scarves, Santini. Did he have a fascination with women's clothing? Not that I know of. No, I don't know. But, those are all items that are on the woman's body, so they are very useful for strangling. There was one where it was a manual strangulation, maybe because they couldn't find those things for a minute there. I don't know that it was a fascination. I don't know much about his home life with his wife at all. A lot of information doesn't seem to be there. Sally asks, did he masturbate in all of them? Again, I don't know because there's no evidence he didn't take the items with him. Just because he masturbated on a blanket one time and left it there. And there's a couple others where I believe there was semen from that looked like masturbation. But there's no reason why he couldn't then masturbate in something else, like one of their scarves, and take the scarf with him, or a cloth and take the cloth with him so he doesn't leave evidence. Hard to say. I mean, but there definitely was a masturbation issue in these particular crimes. And the masturbation, again, on the last 13th victim, was there at the end, not just with the elderly. There was that in the beginning, but it's also there at the end. So again, he could be copycatting, because there are copycats. I believe in BTK, and if you look at my BTK videos, I do believe there were 2 different people. I believe there was a copycat and a DNA issue. That I don't think Dennis Rader was the original original BTK, and I am alone on that stance. But I did a lot of stuff on that case in Wichita, so I have a suspect I believe committed the first part of those crimes, and I've real issues over the claim that Dennis Rader's semen was at the original BTK. There's something really fishy about that. In this case, I don't know that would be as fishy as to his anybody making up a story about his DNA after all these years. BTK, they wanted to close that case down. But this case, I don't know that they would just say, hey, it didn't match. We just don't know if it was him or not, because it's been that way for years. Or we just couldn't get any better DNA, so therefore we don't know. But they claim it matches. I can't prove it, but that's their claim. But he was a rapist, so it's not like Nasser. He wasn't. There was no evidence he raped anybody ever. I mean, he may have been a brutal killer, but he wasn't proven to be a rapist. But he was. There's no question. And when people say, "Well, they say he's a nice guy," no. He's a psychopathic rapist. He abused women in the worst way that he could abuse them, destroying their lives, tying them up, terrifying them. They thought they were going to die. If he didn't kill them then, well, gee, that was nice of him. Yeah. Let's see. Did he have a fetish with the neck? I don't know. One of the things I looked up, because I was looking up what his thing, there was a claim, and this is what I could not find either, along with does he have a small or big penis? The other thing I couldn't find was his daughter. His first daughter was born with a hip problem. And his wife didn't want to get pregnant again because she didn't want to have another child with a disability. And she turned out to have another child, a boy, and he did not have one. But apparently this was a big deal. So he supposedly had to bandage her hip, and he supposedly tied a bow he said once, oh, that made it pretty for her. Now, I looked up what kind of splints and whatever, cast is used for that kind of hip issue. And it's all the stuff is modern day. So it's all like packaged nicely. I don't know what happened 50 years ago. 60 years ago. What was it? 60 years ago. I don't know whether there wasn't like a really good like thing that just kept the hip there. So did he have to bandage that hip and then tied it up? And I had to put the bandages on, tighten that, and then you put a little bow. I don't know whether he had to do something to keep that thing in place. Because I was curious, because ideas sometimes come from things that that you see and that you're used to. And where did you get that from? And it's because you're familiar with that kind of thing. Like, let's say, for example, let's say that the killer goes in and finds a pot of rice and a pot of stew on the stove. And it's evident that he put the rice and the stew on the same plate and ate it. But there's no evidence he ever used a utensil. And it looks like there's finger marks on the plate. You might say, where does that come from? Where would the person have that idea? Why would they eat with their fingers instead of getting a spoon? Well, for me, for my example, I've been in India a lot. I eat Indian food like Indians do. Americans use 3 fingers. Indians just go like this and mush everything together, and you get it all put together, and then you eat it. Well, if somebody were looking at me as a suspect, they might go, that's why you ate like that at that location, because this is part of your thinking. So sometimes you want to look back in the history of somebody and see what are their experiences that they would behave in a certain way. The Boston Strangler had an issue with masturbation. According to his wife, he jacked off all over the damn house. Really annoyed the hell out of her. Now, that's interesting because that's part of these scenes. Even with what appears to be rape, there's also masturbation, which is a unique combination. It's like, what about one or the other? But why both? Maybe it's because that's what he did. Maybe he stayed longer. He did it once. He raped, and then he's like, yeah, I want a little bit more. So he masturbated. So this was who he was in his own home. He wanted sex and he masturbated a lot. So at the scene, the fact that this guy who was the Boston Strangler did sometimes seem to do both fits who he is. So I don't know about the thing around the neck, whether this was a bandaging issue with his daughter that he got into the repetitive adding stuff. I could not find any information. So I can't say that that's true, but I looked it up because I wanted to know because they said the thing about him tying a bow, which again doesn't really match the crimes, but he was tying something around her hip. Why was he tying something around her hip unless he was trying to keep something together, which made me think maybe he does bandages. But I couldn't find proof of that. So, don't know. Pat has a lot of stockings. No, actually, I don't. That was a stocking, a bra, and a scarf. Only one stocking. Let's see. Okay, Bad Betty says, thanks. 2 things, as I wrote to you, the more I researched the case, the more I leaned to the theory that DeSalvo was responsible for all 13 kills. Really? Okay. I really don't, I understand why there is a question on this. This is not one of these, I'm like, this is so obvious, guys. Why don't you think like me? It's not like that. I mean, it's fascinating thing that is hard to prove at this point. And so all I'm doing is presenting from what I can see, from what I consider MO, what I consider signature in this case, and DeSalvo's background in his psychopathy, why he could indeed, including the DNA evidence of an actual brutal murder, why he could be this guy. And the unlikelihood of a whole bunch of guys jumping in and doing exactly the same thing, that I can kick away, because again, a woman raped and strangled in the bushes, and that's all it is. But she's jogging along, and some guy hits her over the head, and he strangles her and rapes her, and then 2 years later, another woman is strangled and raped someplace else. They're similar, but it's so basic that it's hard to link them. But these are not basic crimes. These are very involved, extremely involved crimes that you would have 2 or 3 people all running around doing these exactly involved crimes. That's pretty tricky. You know what I mean? And it's quite unlikely, well, here's a point, Andini. I think the older victims were not exciting enough. Yes, maybe he started there because that was easier to do for him in the beginning. Elderly women are chosen for that reason. People think that they're going to be easier to handle, and maybe they feel they won't be as mind you, he's psychopathic. So in his own mind, they're going to die anyway soon, so I'm doing them a favor. So I'm gonna take them out and see what it feels like to kill. I'm going to enjoy this. And then after a while, it's like, damn, they're just not turning me on enough. I got to go for something better. And then, he moves on. Why did he pick a black woman? Maybe because she just answered the door. Maybe because he decided she's the next step of, it doesn't matter if she's killed. He could be slightly racist. I don't know. And then he goes on to younger white ladies, or then none of that had anything to do with anything. It just could be that the ones who opened the door happen to be elderly or older. If he's just knocking on doors and seeing what happens, you can roll the dice. Let's look at this too. The time of day he picked. The time of day he picked, which I think is getting off of work before going home. Who's more likely to be there? Older women or younger women? Older women, because they're not working. They're living at their homes and they're go out and do their shopping and stuff. And by the time it's getting toward dusk, they want to be home in a safe environment. Younger women, they're out at a job. They may not get home till later. They may go out to the bar afterwards. So it just may be that he got more opportunities with older women because that's who opened the door. See, these things can really throw a whole concept off. He may have wanted younger ones, but crap, I'll take her. She's home. Nobody else answered the door. She's home. So if your percentage of older ladies being at home is much, much higher than younger ladies being at home, that may be the reason. Maybe after he started hitting up younger ladies, he might have knocked on doors of older women and just decided not to bother. That could be true too. There is true that there was nobody identified DeSalvo and those particular. Well, that's not true entirely, because let me go back to this one where see if I can find it. Where it's here. A neighbor of Patricia Bassett, who was murdered by the Boston Strangler, had reported a man in a green uniform. So you see, in the building the day she was murdered. Okay, so yeah, and that could have been DeSalvo. Let's see what else you think about here. I think Stephanie says, muddied up things by negotiating that book deal. Definitely he did, but so did the journalists. The journalists and Bailey, and who knows what Nasser's whole game was too. We don't know. Antini says he's a sexual deviant. His desires will never be satisfied. Yeah. Who knows? I mean, that's what psychopathy and serial homicide is about: power and control, not about necessarily just a sex act. It's the power and control. He didn't have it over his wife. He was annoyed with his wife because she couldn't give him sex enough, and he was losing control over the years. And she eventually divorced him, of course, especially after she found out about this. But when you're a psychopath, and by the way, I forgot to mention this, he had grandiose thinking all of his life. He was always cooler than he was. And some people think that he lied about being the Boston Strangler because it gave him that notoriety. But then again, maybe he did those things because he wanted to be bigger and better just by committing the crimes. And of course, he's willing to then at some point say he did the crimes, because once you're in prison, the game changes. So you have a lot of serial killers who go to prison claiming they did not commit the crimes. And then all of a sudden they go, okay, I did. And then they explain them all because they can get the FBI to come in and talk to them. They can get a book written about them. And when they realize they're not going to get out of prison, then they just change the game to, I want to be famous. So that he confessed doesn't mean he just confessed just to get notoriety, but he didn't do it. He could have well done it, but then it came time when it was worthwhile confessing to, because he got something out of it. So, but let's see. I love Indian food. Yeah, now I'm getting hungry. Oh, I tell you. Let's see. What else you have to say here? It says it takes a person several minutes to die by strangling. Perhaps he enjoyed the feeling he got watching the life go out of them in their eyes while he was killing them. That is very common. Ted Bundy said that. He said he felt like God when he watched them die. Yeah, he's a lovely, lovely person. Sarah has to leave. Got to pick up your dogs. Well, you got to do what you got to do. It's great to have so many vantage points. I wanted to point out the different issues in this case because it is a unique case in that it's not real super clear cut. It's not like you have DNA matching 10 people and you're like, oh, that's done. It's questionable. Lisa S. thinks, I agree on Deanie. I think he did try a few older women, then needed a challenge and tried the younger ones. We can't, any profiler says they can get inside the head of a serial killer is a big fat liar and wants to write books. All I know is that psychopaths and serial killers have very fluid imaginations in many different ways. But that, again, is no different from rest of us human beings. The reasons we'll do things and the reasons we change our minds on things. So I think that when we try to put them in a box and say, oh, because this was an unfortunate old profiling belief, not a methodology, a belief that serial killers picked women to kill that looked like their mothers or sisters, that they had an image in their head. Like they kept saying Ted Bundy because girls had, part down the middle and long hair. Why did they have that? Well, because that was what you looked like in the 70s. Almost everybody had that who went to college. I had that. My sisters had that. That was just the hairstyle. So if the hunting grounds for Ted Bundy was colleges, he wasn't picking the women because of their hairstyle. He was picking them because they're college students and they happen to have that hairstyle. So, if you say, oh my goodness, these women, there are 5 women, they all look Polish. They were all from Polish descent. The guy must be into Polish women. Maybe he just lived in the neighborhood and that's what was in the neighborhood. So the concept that they necessarily picked a look is ridiculous. Now, can they have a preference? Anybody can. You go to a bar, and a guy says, I want myself, I want those hot Colombian women, because I think Colombian women are awesome looking. And then he sits there and damn it, there's no Colombian woman in that bar. So he goes, okay, well, I'll go for Hispanic. It's close enough. I'll go for Mexican. And then he can't get the Mexican lady. By the end of the night, he's got himself a little 40-year-old blonde, because she's drunk. And that's what he gets. So yeah, sometimes you have a preference, but you don't have the access to it. But a lot of times for some serial killers, it's just whoever the hell comes near them. And I say, as neighborhoods change and races mix, different nationalities mix, whatever, you don't necessarily have a person who's picking just one nationality, one look, one race. You have that, there's some now who you look at all the victims, you're like, well, they don't look anything alike. Different ages, different races, different hairstyles, different hair colors. The only thing I can say almost is always true is almost never a fat woman. As I say to people, keep eating Ben and Jerry's, you'll be safe. That's the one thing serial killers don't go for as heavy. heavy women, generally speaking. And that's because they're not only are they not a preference as far as a trophy goes, but they're a lot harder to manage as far as getting the pants off of and putting them in the trunk of your car. They're just harder to deal with. So that's the one thing you rarely see. Usually they go for small. Now, some of these older women actually weren't that, they were pretty, they were not skinny things, but then he went to their homes, they opened the door and he got what he got. And DeSalvo was a pretty strong dude, so he could handle them. And once he had his arm around them, was choking them, they kind of lost right there. And they were older, so they probably couldn't fight as well either. So that's sort of the way that worked. Maybe had a fetish for wrinkles. Well, most of them you kill from behind, so who knows? Oh Lord. Let's see. Maybe he got role playing bingo at a pub by the Blue Rinse Brigade. This is also a thing. You never know. For example, his father brutalized his mother, but then after his mother divorced the father, things didn't get better. Who knows if he hated his mother too, or maybe he fantasized about. Who knows? Yeah, there's all kinds of peculiar things said about him. We don't know what he actually did with anybody. He supposedly sexually assaulted a 9-year-old child. What's to say that he didn't do something with older ladies too, before all of this went on. So Sally says, just when I thought being old was keeping me safe. Oh, well, at least I have the overweight in my favor now. See, there's always a good side to everything. But yeah, so I say it's a fascinating series of homicides. But if I had to lean anywhere at this point, with the DNA, with the similar MO, and with what I call the signature of the multiple use of ligatures, including those after death, which include weird stuff like pillowcases and blouses and just other stuff you don't normally put around somebody's neck, I will lean toward one killer and Albert DeSalvo. So yeah, I'm gonna go against three FBI profilers, and with the police department in this case. But I don't know. I actually don't know what Ressler and Douglas and Safric think at this point in time. When I wrote my book years ago, I did say it was Albert DeSalvo because of the thing I thought Bo was true, which apparently is not. So, but that was just off the cuff type of thing. Now that I've looked at it, I still come up with him, but not because of the bows. But I don't know, when depending on how much information you have at the time you write a book or you're looking at something, you may not have a final properly thought through analysis. So I don't know. They may still believe what they believe and think basically Ressler and Safric said that there were more than one killer. Douglas said it absolutely was not a DeSalvo, but now that there's DNA, I don't know what he'd say. So, but when you're analyzing, and the police have this problem, profilers have this problem, things are fluid depending on your information source. And so, I mean, I could always gain more information and change my mind. But at this point in time, from what I've been able to access, I'm going to go with one killer, and it's DeSalvo. Andini says, Pat, I never knew all about the Boston Strangler. Neither did I till I started doing this show. Thank you for the insight. You're an amazing teacher. I hope so. That's my whole point here. So anyway, that's it for today. Well, thank you for being here. If you're new here and you're still here, please do like and subscribe to the channel. And I will be seeing you all next week for the Hangout. And I'm still working on what case I want to do next time. But since the movie came out, which I hated, from Hulu, I got to remember, cancel the subscription. I lose a lot of money. I have so many subscriptions to so many channels for the purpose of doing the show. And I just never had much on Hulu. So I was forced into this one. But I got 30 days to cancel it, so I don't have to pay whatever per month I got to pay. Benny says, Pat, I'm amazed at the fact I watched quite a few documentaries on the case and researched it, and yet you, in 2 hours, brought more to the table. Oh, thank you, Benny. I appreciate that. I do my best. I do. Thank you, Scarlett. And thank you, Gretchen. And thank you. You're three Aka. I'm trying to figure out how that works. You're a three Aka. I'm not sure what that means, but very cool. So I will see you guys soon for the next show, and have a great rest of the. Are we on Sunday? If you're here live, have the rest of a great Sunday. Bye.